So Chapter 10 deals with monopoly. As always, if you have questions on an exam that deals with multiple chapters, make sure that you take into account the key words in the question. So if we look at this first question, we're saying a monopolistic firm. So we're talking about a monopoly. In Chapter 11, we'll either be talking about oligopoly or monopolistic competition. Here, there's no word competition. It's just a monopolistic firm faces a downward sloping demand curve. Because of what? So here we're really focusing on a monopoly. Monopoly is one seller. Marginal revenue is negative throughout the feasible range of output is not true. We could see it on this graph here that we have. Marginal revenue curve goes down twice as steep as the demand curve, but it may go negative at some portion, but not for the whole feasible range of output. The market price is affected by the amount sold by a monopolistic firm. That is true. The price that they could charge, it depends on how much they decide to produce. There are a large number of firms. This is already false. There's only one firm. The demand for its product is always inelastic. That is also false. It's not always inelastic. You could go through the notes and understand why not. The monopolistic firm can exploit economies of scale. It may be able to, but we don't know. We don't know what its cost function looks like. So it's really this idea that the market price is affected by the amount sold by the monopolistic firm. If they want to sell Q2 units instead of Q1, they must drop the price because they face the whole demand curve. The idea that if you're at the Bell Center and you're selling hot dogs or something else and you want to increase your sales, well, unless you make people suddenly hungry, the only way you could change the sales amount by being the only person there and having a fixed market is by dropping the price. Consider the following average revenue and marginal revenue curves for a single price monopolist. If the marginal costs were positive and constant but less than A being this amount here, the profit maximizing output for the single price monopolist would be what? So the two limits that they're setting is that the marginal costs are positive. So they're not equal to zero. And then in this chapter, you should know that if marginal costs were equal to zero, we'd have this flat marginal cost curve, which would mean that we would produce where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue, which would be over here. And at this quantity, the price that they should charge would be this amount. So if the extreme case happens where marginal cost is equal to zero, we're not going to produce Q3 or Q4 units of output, it'll be Q2. Here it says it's positive, so if you draw any marginal cost curve that is positive, it's going to intersect with MR anywhere to the left of quantity 2. And the reason why they say it has to be a cost curve that is less than A is that if the costs were somewhere up here, the marginal cost curve was somewhere up here, there wouldn't be an intersection point between MC and MR, so we wouldn't produce anything. But anytime we draw a cost curve anywhere here, we could see that the quantity that should be produced should be between 0 and Q2. Greater than 0, but less than Q2 is what we're looking for here. Consider a monopolist that is able to distinguish between two distinct market segments, A and B. The marginal cost is $100 for each unit produced, so this could be a train ride or something else. The firm is currently selling its output at a single price and allocating its output across segments, so the marginal revenue in segment A is 85 and in B is 105. So we can see that both segments are valuing this product differently, and they have different marginal revenues going on here. But we also know that this monopolist is charging a single price. So we've seen that when there's differences and when we could segment the market and there's no resale possibility, when there's differences in the two markets, the monopolist could make more profits by segmenting and charging different prices for both segments. So here they're saying, is this firm maximizing its profits? Yes is not the right answer. It has to be no, because it's only possible to equate MR is equal to MC when there is a single MR curve. That is false. We're not talking about single MR curve ever. No, this firm can increase its profits by price discriminating across the two market segments. This is what we're looking for. So anytime that you have this idea of price discrimination, if you have two different types of markets that value the good differently, you should price discriminate if you can, if your goal is to maximize profits. This is a good, tricky question to have. It's not that tricky, but it's always good to understand what happens to marginal revenue as we produce more and more and more. For a single price monopolist producing and selling 9 units, the marginal revenue earned by selling the 9th unit is what? Well, if we're only producing 8 units, our total revenue is $40. If we produce 9 units, 9 times 4, it's $36. So we have effectively lost $4 of revenue for producing that extra unit. So minus 4 is our marginal revenue. It can go negative because for us to produce that 9th unit and to be able to sell it, we need to drop the price of every unit by $1. So at $5, we were able to sell 8 units. So all those 8 first units, we're losing $1. So we're losing $8 on those previous units that used to be sold. And we're getting one more sale, but that one more sale is only at $4. So it does not compensate enough for the $8 loss. $8 loss plus $4 gain is still $4 lost. The diagram below shows the demand curve and marginal costs and marginal revenue curves for a new heart medication for which the pharmaceutical firm holds a 20-year patent, essentially a monopoly on its production and sales. This production gives the firm monopoly power, obviously, for the 20 years of the patent. Assume the pharmaceutical firm charges a single price for its drug as its profit maximum level of output. Consumer surplus is represented by what? So first off here, any of these graphs, we need to set MR is equal to MC. This intersection point tells us what quantity the monopoly should produce. Then from this intersection point, we move up and find, because the marginal revenue is based on the idea that we're charging the maximum price possible. So here, what is that price possible at Q is 0? Well, it's based on the willingness to pay in the demand curve. So it'd be this point here. This is the price of this charge. So at this story, this is the quantity of units sold. This is the price charged. Okay. So this times this whole area here would be total revenue. We have a certain level of costs. So producer surplus is not that whole amount, but now we're focusing on consumer surplus. Well, consumer surplus is always going to be for the units sold. So we disregard everything to the right of Q0. For the units sold, anything above the market price, so above what we're paying, up to what we value for the product, this represents willingness to pay. So on that first unit, we get this amount of gain, this amount, this amount, this amount. Well, this whole area of D and E would be my consumer surplus. So areas D and E. And that was it for chapter 10. Hopefully that clarifies the answers to this chapter.